shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. I'm not sure. But the president overseeing the incomprehensible, the full panoply of meaningless power, Air Force One, Marine One, the limo, the motorcade, the briefcase with the nuclear launch codes, all amounting in this case to a man railing against the sea, a sombre lesson for us all. The oil spill goes on, the wars go on, the debt grows, and so, for too many of us, does our denial. The claim here is that the United States is slowly sinking either into a gigantic oil spill or into the in somewhere between the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. The US is in terminal decline. Obama can't do much about it. He might sound good, but there are these big realities that he's just not affecting. Is that one overdrawn? Is the US in terminal decline? What should Obama be doing about it?
Well, I think that's the great fear that Americans have. I came back in January and I've noticed since then that the polls are showing that Americans have even got less happy about the direction of their country since when I left. So we've got 23% happy with the direction compared to normally 40%. And I think that's the great problem for America is how do you manage all these problems that they've got around the world? How do you deal with a whole lot of things that they can't really affect? So, for instance, you know, we've got the economy. There's a great fear in America about China. They're much less relaxed about the rise of China than we are in Australia. You've got this mountain of debt, and Americans really grappling. They're not nearly as literate about what debt means and how economies work than, say, Australians. And then, of course, on the left, you've got the concern that America hasn't managed to lead on climate change. On the right, that it's not taking a tough stance on terrorism. So I think there's just this incredible fear that somehow America is losing its place in the world. And that's very hard for Obama to manage. I don't know if we can blame him for the oil spill, but his great challenge over the next 2.5 years before he faces election is to really carve out a much clearer direction of what he's doing. And if the economy improves, I think he's got a much better chance.
So, Don, what do you think about this? So we're both, so it's an objective question, is the US in terminal decline? And then if you were advising President Obama, depending on your answer to that question, how would you advise him to manage in those waters? I mean,
how to manage America's terminal decline. It's a really big...
Well, it's pretty hard to win elected office in the US saying, we're number 2 and I'm going to get us there. So how, if Barack Obama is a very smart guy, he sees all these challenges, he knows what's going on, how does one lead in that environment?
Well, the example of the oil spill is a good one in a way for the, the problem that he faces and the madness of modern politics in a way, because you know what Superman would have done. I mean, he would have dived down into the water and plugged the leak. Obama had to stand on the shore and say it's BP's fault and they're going to pay, which is nothing like Superman. And he had to be down there because Bush had got to New Orleans 3 days late. So it was all a bit of a pointless charade.
So it's a matter of expectation, you're quite right.
Yeah.
But is presidency about managing expectation or more than
knowing Richard Cohen, I'm really surprised he left out the Icelandic volcanic ash cloud as well. Obama hadn't dispelled. But the fact remains and has to be faced that in his, I believe it was in his acceptance speech at Chicago, the president did say that we'll be able to date from this the moment when, various spreads of hope and aspiration and so on, and also the moment when the oceans stop rising. I remember thinking, he'll be sorry he said that. He'll be deeply sorry he said that. And also wondering if possibly there wasn't a note of hubris creeping in here. This is the point where the really bad columnists would have mentioned King Canute already, and always, as people do, got it wrong.
Well, one thing that, of course, is coming back is that the citations to Paul Kennedy's 1987, yes. The End of American Empire book are going up again. One looks at the problems in the world and the flight back to the dollar and other things that are happening in global currency markets. Despite all this hand-wringing, it seems that that the world still looks to the United States on so many dimensions. how does one manage that in an environment where it does seem that the levers of power are harder to pull, they're less effective than they've ever been?
Well, go on, Chris.
No, please.
I was just going to say, it seems to me that a lot of the chickens have yet to come home to roost, really. That in a way, health and even the surge are nothing compared with the domestic problem. I think that they haven't really turned on him yet. The people who are still doing it very hard because of the GFC, and the black population hasn't yet got up in the morning and said, well, what have we got out of this guy? Nothing. And the big thing hasn't happened yet, which seems to happen to presidencies. You know, not a 9/11 necessarily, but there's always something in politics which doesn't go your way, or you've got to try and turn it into making it go your way. And the thing is amorphous as America's alleged decline is not really going to be it. I think it'll be some offshoot of that, or something completely extraneous to the whole problem that will define his presidency.
Okay, so I'm looking at the watch here, and I think we'll get maybe 5 minutes grace at the end of this session. I would like to engage the audience in our conversation soon, so maybe I could end by asking our panelists to a different version of the "Who is Barack Obama?" question. And the stimulus material here is going to be recent American presidents to whom Obama has sometimes been likened. So people on the right like to say that Barack Obama is the second coming of Jimmy Carter. He's got all this pious moralism, but he'll be undone by a combination of economic problems and wars that he doesn't have the stomach for. Barack Obama himself has said, I'm not sure I want to be Bill Clinton so much as Ronald Reagan, and I'm sure at the moment Barack Obama is hoping that his presidency in fact turns out a bit like Reagan's, suffer a big loss in your first midterm referendum, but ride through to a glorious second term in which you change the world. Don, I think we were speaking before and I said I was going to ask you this, Clinton, Reagan, Carter, and you said, well, none of the above. He's like no former president. How do you think we should index Barack Obama?
Well, to be quick, I'd say I hope he's somewhere between Eisenhower and LBJ myself. I hope he's. I mean, I'm a bit of a fan of Eisenhower, and I think the Liberals got it all wrong with Eisenhower. They actually, you know, they were so disappointed that Adlai Stevenson didn't win, but Adlai Stevenson was never really going to be the man. I mean, I hope he's...
So 1950s America was a pretty quiet and boring time. How do you admire this guy who didn't give a particularly good speech, I don't think?
No, but it's not like a simple translation. I think I always feel most comfortable about America when there's someone calm in the centre, and they're usually Republicans, pre-Reaganite Republicans. And I think Johnson has got a bad press too. Take Vietnam out of the way, he's the man who got the Civil Rights Bill through. So, and he's a hard pragmatist. They're the types I like.
Anne?
I don't really think he's like any of the more recent presidents. Perhaps he'll be remembered a little like FDR if he manages to pull off his healthcare reform and can reform it further in his second term, if he has one. I think I agree with Don. I think having someone calm at the centre is pretty important. And one thing I saw an interview he did during the campaign where he said, I'm the sort of guy who doesn't get too high and I don't get too low. And I think that's what America probably needs in a time of quite a lot of turmoil.
But that's so interesting, Christopher Hitchens, and this will be the last word from here. Anne and Don have both said it's no drama Obama. That's the bottom line here. That's the guy we want. God, that's a long way from the reason he's in the White House. How do you square those circles?
And I think some distance from reality too, and your mention of high and low is a nice segue into what I wanted to draw your attention to anyway. A detail, but a useful one. The President is a secret smoker. His Surgeon General's report is mandated every year by Congress to have a report on the President's health. Says for all his promises to quit, he still hasn't. This argues for me contents under pressure, which is one of my favourite expressions. I like people who are suffering from that. That he does have some sense of the appalling gravity of the office. He knows that at any minute, what happened in South Korea yesterday could be repeated, and we'd all be upended into a terrible confrontation that was none of our making. And